Good evening, everybody. I'd like to call our meeting to order. Can I have everybody please rise for our flag salute? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good evening. Can I get a motion to accept our August 8th meeting agenda?
A motion.
That's Christy. And a second? And Lori. All in favor? Okay. Public hearing. Can I have a motion to move into the public hearing portion of the board meeting?
A motion.
Christy.
Second.
And Ken. All in favor? Okay. At this time, I'd like to introduce Mrs. Maureen Ladd, to our school business manager, to present the public hearing portion of the board meeting.
Is it on? Perfect. So, the district safety plan is a requirement that all districts have.
Turn on the side.
Right. So the district-wide plan is a comprehensive multi-hazard school safety plan. It covers all the buildings of the district, addresses interventions, responses, management at the district level. It's under the contents of the previews of the Commissioner's Law. The SAVE Legislation Act was passed in 2000. There's education law requirements and there's commissioner regulations requirements. It's supposed to help prevent and minimize the effects of violent incidents, how we act during emergencies, what we do, and facilitate the coordination of the school and the district with all of our local resources, the county, town, village. Annually, the requirements say that we must adopt our district-wide safety plan, and that's what we're doing tonight. We must hold a public hearing, which is what we're doing right now. Our plan has been up and available for review for the last 30 days. It's been posted on our website. It's always on our website every year after the board approval, and it's there until it's updated with the next approved district safety plan. There are district-wide safety plan requirements and building level response plan requirements. The building level plans are not for public view. They're basic plans, their functions, their assessments and hazards, and their specific items that they are going to do are only for the buildings. So the district-wide safety plan, which is our part of it, which is the part that I facilitate, it's broad concepts. It's basically your policies, your procedures. It includes our DASA regulations, our code of conduct requirements, board adoption, public hearing, posting on the websites. The building level emergency response plans, excuse me, are more specific to the buildings. It totally outlines what the school personnel are going to do and how they're going to respond to various emergencies that might happen in the buildings. It has details about where they evacuate to, what the children, what we're doing with the kids. And it contains specific numbers for faculty, staff, emergency response. It's confidential and it's protected from disclosure. So tonight, on the agenda is a pieces that go together to comprise the district safety plan. So your item H2A is the district-wide safety plan. Does not include the building emergency responses. We do follow the National Incident Management System plans and the Incident Command System, so our responses are developed in coordination with emergency personnel, and the building level teams put these together for their buildings. Basically, this is a review of requirements. This is due by September 1st, which is why we always hold a public hearing at this August meeting. We have it posted 30 days prior to adoption. It's posted on our website, but this one does not contain the confidential information. The second piece of the district-wide plan is the code of conduct. This is for approval tonight. It's H2B. This basically outlines how we're going to maintain order in the school property, in the buildings, how we're going to govern the content or the conduct of teachers, students, and all other personnel, as well as visitors. The code of conduct is also reviewed annually as part of this process and posted on the district website. There are two bigger changes in this year's code of conduct. We had, and all the changes, just so you can see them on there, are highlighted on any of the plans. There were very few changes in the safety plan, the first one, just updating with dates and new information. The code of conduct does have an update to add searches, because that's become an item that we deal with, especially in the high school. And it has changed the dress code, and I believe Tom shared with you the dress code policy that we're updating to. So that has been changed for next year's code of conduct. The third component of this is the new public employer emergency health plan. This happened last year, or 2 years ago, with the onset of the pandemic. So in 2020, we were required to have a new legislation that addressed public health emergencies involving communicable diseases. So that year, the first time we had this was 2 years ago. When things like this come out, we don't, start from scratch. Usually the BOCEs and our safety COSER, they put together the start of these things, and then we detail them to the needs of our own buildings and districts. So they started this for us, and our district safety plan, or our district safety committee, revised it and put it together. And so this year it really isn't changed much. It's been updated a little bit with some changes in dates, and some of the items have been, I guess I would say, made a little bit broader, because it's now that COVID, those mandates have kind of started to ease. They're making this plan, the pandemic planning, broader, so it covers not just that, it covers other issues that could arise in the future. So this is the item H2C for your adoption tonight. And the fourth piece of the plan is the emergency response poster. This is the 5 responses that are used district-wide and required for all districts with the emergency management planning. And that is what comprises our district safety plan. And we hope that you will be able to approve it for us tonight. Anybody has any questions? Be happy to answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Maureen. At this time, I'd like to ask for a motion to adjourn the public hearing.
Motion.
And a second. Tim. All in favor? It is now 6:39. Could I have a motion to open up the regular board meeting?
I'll second.
And Kristen. All in favor? And at this time, I'm going to go to community open forum. Do we have anything for? No? Okay, so we're going to go on to item D. We're going to spotlight Moore High School. This was originally scheduled for April 4th, and we're going to have Mrs. Enright take over that. So if I could have Mrs. Enright.
I think it's also important to notice that the 2 students are now graduates, and they've come back. 3? Oh, she must have been sitting behind Gavin.
Yeah, snuck it on.
3 students.
The 4th too, but her mother has COVID, so she has a bow out.
Well, that's pretty impressive that you guys graduated and came back. We appreciate that.
Some never left. She took my life. Is this on?
gotta push the button.
You gotta push the button so the lights up.
How's this?
Perfect.
Okay. So my name is Kristen Enright. When we created this presentation, I was the executive principal, director of counseling and pathways to success. And we just want to thank you for allowing us to present this. Unfortunately, we did have a student pass. We were at calling hours the day of this presentation. So we did postpone this, and we are excited to be able to give our spotlight presentation today. So with us, we have Nicole Heath. As you can see up on the screen, she's the work-based learning coordinator as well as the career exploration internship teacher. And we have 3 of our 2022 graduates with us. So Kylie, Gavin, and Gabby will be speaking about their experiences in the internship class shortly. So as you can see, we wanted to highlight and make sure and remind everybody that we're always striving as a district to have our students graduate and walk away with these attributes and competencies of a Central Square learner. And you will notice very quickly that we successfully did so, at least with these 3 that are going to be presenting. So the 4 competencies are effective communicator and collaborator, innovator and critical thinker, contributing citizen, and emotional intelligence. And at this time, I'm going to turn the mic over to our teacher, Ms. Nicole Heath.
Thank you for having us today. The next slide here, we just have listed our 16 career clusters on there, so it kind of is a continuation, but the career clusters are a nationally recognized framework, and so this is what we're utilizing kind of as our umbrella of what we're doing through our career exploration and also through the Career Center, some of our work-based learning programs. So we'll talk about that as I continue on to this next slide. So kind of as a department, our business department oversaw and took over the Career Center last year, but obviously at the high school we were mostly remote. So this year was our first year in the Career Center, really trying to build our program back up. And 2 things that were really important for us to start with were building a Canvas class for the Career Center and also this live Google Calendar. And so what's on the Canvas class is right now it's open to students and will be open to parents as well to be able to get on, but all the resources we wanted to provide to students. And those resources were everything from our presenters for our career discussions to things like career and college resources, so how do I put a resume together, filling out a college application, obtaining letters of recommendation, but also like if we were having visits to the school where college and military professionals would be here, when that would occur, and that calendar would update all that information. So at any point, students could go in there, click on and see who was going to be there. And we would color code those opportunities. So we have volunteer opportunities on there for the students, any of our career speakers that were coming in. Many came in, but we also did some virtual as well, any college or military professionals coming in, and any other opportunities we had. So it was a really easy way for students to know what was going on, but also to have the resources there that they needed. So we found that both of those worked very well for us. So if you see at the top, our second goal was to set up and promote various work-based learning opportunities. So once we had our resources and a way to communicate out, then we started working on growing the opportunities we have for our students. So one of the things we were doing was looking at the volunteer opportunities that we had and any new ones we could establish and then promote out to the students. We had the SUNY Upstate Summer Volunteer Program came back again after COVID. So that was a great one, and we had some students apply for that, and we walked them through the application process. Some needed some additional help, but students were able to go through that, and we had some students attending that, actually currently attending that, as well as just a bunch of other volunteer opportunities. We know that we give out the Presidential Service Award, so we oversee that out of the Career Center, so we recognize those seniors at graduation this year for actually 2 out of 3, right? We both are there. Also had volunteer hours to go along with that. So that's one of our initiatives that we oversaw and tried to create more opportunities for. Another thing that was really important for us were to get guest speakers in from all different career areas, and that's where those 16 career clusters come in. So we're trying to make sure that we have representatives from all those different clusters. And that's just a sampling of some of the career discussions we had. We record the majority of our career discussions. We started that last year when we were doing them remote. So on the Canvas website, you have access to over 50 of those recordings that we have had. Some are alumni of our school or just local community members, but we also have people, because of obviously the luxury of Zoom, nationally recognized people that were coming in to speak as well. So we put on another 35 career discussions this current year, and over 200 students attending those. So obviously with field trips, they were a little shorter in supply this year. We started picking up the field trips. I think we had permission at the end of the year to start doing that again. But one thing we did was we are working with other career center coordinators in the area as to not duplicate our efforts too much. So we meet on a quarterly basis, and one of the things that was important was setting up a job fair for seniors and even juniors to attend as well. They wanted to get into the workplace. So the coordinator at West Genesee High School set that up, and then we took students to that job fair. And then what was nice when I was there was that I met the person from the New York State Department of Labor who is in charge of the apprenticeship program, and I knew that was an area I needed to know a little bit more about that I wasn't as familiar with. So I was able to set up a training so that, and we invited anybody in the local area over Zoom where she went through the program, so now I have a better idea of, you know, how to present that to students, but also some of our school counselors attended, and it was really good avenue from just being at that job fair. We're also doing full class presentations and student seminars. So we would have seminars during advisement, so if students needed help with filling out the FAFSA or had questions about it, what to do with an admissions essay, obtaining letters of recommendation, things like that. We also did large-scale presentations as well. We hosted Lockheed Martin here. We had a group of 30 students that came in, and we had this career exploration day and a half day. And with that, students were able to learn about the field, but also they collaborated together and kind of did this competition, building a Martian colony. Obviously, one of the tried and true things is having the representatives come in, so we always host those, so we got to see a lot more people in person again, but still some preferred to do over Zoom, so we did that as well. We also were able, right at the end of the year, to get some students out for college field trips. We promote those to the students just as an opportunity. Some of them may not know what they want to do, but we usually try to get to a 2- and 4-year college so they can see those options, and also I tell them you can use it as a foundation to compare to other schools if those aren't the colleges you're considering. So we had a small group came out for those. Goal 3 says incorporating career exploration into school-wide curriculum. So this is one of our bigger pieces that we took on. So the nice thing about having our business teachers be in the career center is that we can offer actual, like create lessons and offer sessions to our students. So that really try to hit all the grade levels and different content. So this is where we started this year. We have the career experience class, all sophomores, so we brought them into the career center. Many of them, it was their first time, making sure they had exposure to it and providing them with information about career exploration resources. We've also had a presentation on the military academies to all the career experience students, which is nice as well. Former board member. And then we have the JA Inspire program. So Junior Achievement, who used to be more of an in-person kind of process, now has an Inspire program online, so we're able to offer that. And they actually hook up with local businesses and allow them to do virtual career fairs, but actually connect with these local businesses as well. We had students in the college prep classes, which is typically a junior year class, come into the Career Center for presentations. We also worked with Mrs. Saunders' biology classes as they were doing career research and helped them with their STEM project, and also what resources they could use. And then we hooked up the technology department with MACNY because they have a new internship apprenticeship program they're starting in the fall. So we had them come in to give presentations to those students so they could see what opportunities were available for the fall in trying to get an apprenticeship program. Right. So the other thing we do is we have a career exploration internship program. It's typically a small group of seniors at this point that we're starting with. There's a lot of work behind it because we're doing individual placements for students as well as training plans for them. And that's why we brought some of our students in today so they could just talk a little bit about the internship program, what it was like for them. So we typically have about 15 students. And every time we have another 15 students, we can open another section of it. But what we do is individually work with every student, try to place them. And so you can see these were our placement sites over the past year. We had some students stay in the same placement all year. We had some students that chose to try a different placement, so they might have been between two. And we have 3 out of 4 of our students have returned. Faith, unfortunately, could not make it because her mother is sick. So I'll just give it, I guess, these students a chance to introduce themselves first. Easier here. I'll have them introduce themselves and just maybe let you know what college or your future plans, goals, things like that first. Okay.
Hi, my name is Gabby. I'm planning on attending SUNY Oswego in the fall, and I plan on being a chemistry adolescence education major and hopefully one day returning here to teach.
She had to plug that.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Gavin. I'm also going to SUNY Oswego, and I will be studying business administration in the fall.
Hello, I'm Kylie. I'm going to Utica University in the fall for biology, hopefully finding something in that career field.
All right. So I'll just let each one of them maybe discuss a little bit about their internship. So where you interned, the career field, responsibilities, things you learned, whatever you'd like to share.
So I interned with my high school chemistry teacher, Mr. Blimpie. I did things like grade papers, attend faculty meetings, like department meetings. I set up labs. I took down labs, and I observed him teaching both his like regular chemistry classes and his AP chemistry classes. I helped design lesson plans and change formats from paper copies to online copies.
I interned at the transportation department, and I spent over 300 hours there helping the secretaries and all of the dispatchers with various tasks, which include talking on the radio, answering phones, and copying, filing, printing any papers that they may have needed done.
I just have to jump in. So why don't you share with these guys how you already had experience with bus radios?
So a couple years ago, I did a little of my own investigation to see if it was even legal to own my own radio of sorts, to kind of figure out how they did their day-to-day basis in the transportation supervisor world. So I looked it up, and sure enough, it was legal to do. So I purchased my own and got it all hooked up and was able to see how they did everything on a day-to-day basis.
Fascinating.
Yes. When I went in to observe him, one of the employees was asking him the bus number of the certain bus driver because he had all the drivers and numbers already memorized before he had gone in there.
And I also want to just say how relentless he is, because he would see me in the hallway and he said he wants an intern down there. And he would literally pop into my office probably 3 or 4 times a day. So we definitely made it happen. Great job.
And it was a great time. All the drivers were great. They would help me with anything I needed, always there for support, and overall it was a great experience.
And they all raised money for you at the end of the year.
They did.
How much did they give you?
$750 towards my future education.
Excellent. You were very well liked in transportation.
Thank you.
Well, as you can see up there, I went through 2 things with the internship program. I originally started with Wolfenden Law Firm since I thought I wanted to go into criminal prosecution, and I found out very quickly while I was there it was not for me. Paperwork is not my forte. I did not like it. And so I ended up wanting to go for a more hands-on approach, and I ended up going to Sunshine Horses up on Verplank. It's a nonprofit organization where they handle formerly abused horses, former race horses, and put them out for adoption. And I've been there since then, and I've actually been going over the summer every Sunday to help them out. But it's a great organization, and I've learned a lot through both experiences.
If there's anything else you want to add, if there was something like specifically learned or skill or anything you want to share, you can, or I can speak again. It's up to you.
As I spent a lot of my afternoons and evenings there at the bus garage, a lot of the secretaries were one to help me with things I needed to learn. They would teach me often how payroll worked and how the breakdown of employees were paid. So when I was, if and when I am to get a position there or somewhere relatively the same, I would understand how it works and how unions are formed and how that all works out.
You told me prior that you wanted to be director of transportation. After that whole experience you went through, is that something you still want to pursue?
I do.
Great.
I asked him the same question.
I'm cutting him just for a minute because I think Kylie's story was a good one, and the fact that these internships aren't just about reaffirming, like, yeah, Ben, this is what I want to do, but also exploring and knowing that she's not going to go through college for the next 4 years thinking this is what she's going into and then getting an internship and realizing it wasn't for her. So it's so nice to hear stories like her where I went, I found out it wasn't for me, I got to switch, and what a great chance to be able to do that while you're still in high school.
Right, and that was Faith's story too. So Faith initially, like, I know she wasn't even enrolled in the internship program in September and came to me in the hallway and, I want to be a vet, can I intern in a vet's office? I'm like, yeah, that should be fine. We have a couple places that usually work with us. And she was there for a day, and I get an email later, I hope she doesn't sharing the story, but that she nearly fainted watching one of the procedures. And I had a conversation and she came back. I said, hey, is this something you still want to pursue? And she's like, absolutely not, it's not for me. And I did share with her when I was a junior in high school, I did a job shadowing experience. I thought I wanted to go to the medical field, and I fainted twice in the hospital that first week, and I was like, it wasn't for me. And so it's the same kind of thing. You're able to see, like, this was not the place I need to be. And she is now going to George Washington University to study politics, and she ended up interning with Al Sturkey's office. So she got experience in his office for the remaining part of the internship. And then the other thing I was just going to mention is that we even had students that were offered jobs after, whether it was part-time. For one student, she's going on to college, but she's working part-time at the Humane CMY. And then for another student, she's full-time at Cicero Animal Clinic, and they are going to help pay for her to get her vet tech degree. So ends up creating a lot of opportunities for the students, whether they're learning what they do or don't want to do, but also the connections they're forming as well. Does anybody have any questions?
I actually have one, and it's really for the students more than anything. Besides, like not wanting to do something, did you learn something different? Like say for example, the teacher piece, because my wife is a teacher, and I know you guys know this. Everybody sees the teacher from the student point of view when they go, and then when you're behind the scenes and you see the work that they have to do. Did you learn anything from that?
Yeah, I definitely did. I learned that, like, teachers really make use of their planning time, and, like, there is so much work, like, going into, like, making papers, making lessons, like, ensuring that the lessons are actually making progress for the students and that the students are learning from them. And it was really interesting also to, like, go to, like, faculty meetings and stuff and just see, like, the dynamics of everything and see teachers kind of, like,
Well, and that's the part I
teachers.
did. They're not really teachers all the time, you know.
Yeah.
And you know, the same with this young man with the, you know, being in business, you deal with a lot of personnel, and that's what I do a lot of. And it's just like personnel, you know.
Yes, there were a lot of personalities when I would pick up the phone. Some were nice and some not so much.
They're personalities.
Is that the experience you got? I mean,
Yeah.
really to see, like, the levels.
Well,
of
that's why I
employees,
love
that's-
internships, because that's what, you know, like I made my kids go to, my daughter wanted to be a nurse and my son wanted to be an electrician, so I pushed him to go to BOCES. So, because I didn't want to be like this young lady who went to law school and decided on, or veterinary, and all of a sudden they passed out. It's like, okay.
And what's nice is this program complements the city program too. So typically if a student says to me, I want to do law enforcement, I usually say you're probably better off going to the city program. But there's a lot of different programs we have here that aren't serviced there.
Well,
so.
that's funny because my wife teaches the science in the nursing program, and she takes them to Ithaca School of chiropractic.
Yeah.
And they take them to the cadavers and show them the cadavers and everything. She says half of them pass out.
Yeah.
They're done. So that was kind of funny that you told me that about
Once
the
you start
vet.
paying for it.
Yeah, saves them a lot of money. Thank you.
Thank
Great
you.
job, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, you guys. At this time, we're going to move on to item D2, which is the goals, results, and data presentation from Mrs. Erin Phillips.
Okay. So just as a reminder, these were our goals for this past school year, 21-22. Increase oral reading fluency at 3rd grade because that is our measure. We really want to make sure that our kids are where they need to be by 3rd grade. Because if they're not, it takes many hours after that to try to get them caught up. So raise that by 3%, and then looking at all of the subtests that the kids do from K to 5 on our Dibbles benchmarks, raise that from beginning, 3% from the beginning of the year. So that was just, those are what our goals were in every building, and Mr. Colabufo's district goals. Based on my presentation in January, we did make some changes when the data came in. So at 2nd grade, at Cole and Hastings, just like at 1st grade in all of the buildings, they implemented a walk to skills model. So Teresa Rogers, the reading coach at the time, worked with the 2nd grade teachers to implement that same format to teaching skills. So the kids switched among the 3 teachers and the special ed teachers based on their results from the January data, and they intervened at the point of where the kids were at to try to close that gap and move them on. The kindergarten classes, during their AIS time, switched students at Brewerton and Millard Hawk. They felt that there were results in different classrooms that they wanted to make sure that the kids that were struggling were getting what they needed during that time. So they put some different strategies in place at that time. Brewerton calls it FROG, that is Mr. Bowden's acronym, and I forget what it stands for. He's had it since he was at Cole, but he was like, we're putting FROG in place again, and that's what we're just doing. And then Millard Hawk made the same change, but did not call it FROG. And then in the spring, so the kindergarten skills curriculum has 10 units. When the standards changed, there were certain skills that were taught in units 9 and 10 that when the New York State standards changed, they moved those skills to 1st grade. And primarily that is the long vowel sounds or the magic E. I'm sure you've all heard that. So unit 10 is primarily the magic E sound or the long vowels. So because it's no longer a kindergarten skill, we don't do unit 10 in kindergarten anymore. Unit 9 it introduces the uppercase letters and some tricky words, but it's a shorter unit. So unit 8 is really where the kindergarten skills materials end. But there's an assessment that sometimes is given, or it's given because it's part of the unit but never really looked at. So I let all the principals and consultants know that everybody in kindergarten was going to give this assessment, and they weren't allowed to move on until the data was analyzed. And then a meeting with me was held, and we looked at the kids and we made movements. So this was in about early May. Some were at the end of April, some early May. And the principals and the consultants sat and they looked at their data. And, you know, teachers have different strengths in different areas that they, you know, work better in. And there were some that the kids that were the struggling readers really took off in certain classes. So for the kids in those buildings, when they made the change and all the kids shifted classes, the teacher who works got those results for the kids who were struggling, that's where the struggling kids went. So we really looked at the data and made instructional decisions based on the kids that were with these teachers sitting in front of them every day. So, and then some have a real great ability to continue to move those higher kids and really get them to continue their trajectory and continue moving. So for those kids that were already blue and green on dibbles, we made those changes. So for the last month and a half of school, the kids who needed extensive intervention got it right at their level for an hour, and then they had AIS, so they were kind of getting double dipped. And because we were at the end of the kindergarten curriculum based on CKLA, it was really a time for those kids that were kind of middle of the road to solidify and make them a little bit stronger, and then the kids who were blue and green and solid continued to move. So they were in the decodable readers for Unit 9, and really continuing to move, working on some comprehension, because a lot of times when the kids are still learning to read, they're still just getting the words off the page, but they're spending so much energy focusing on what they're reading that they're not really paying attention to what they're reading. So you could ask them a basic question and they're still kind of missing that question. So that was the focus for that high group, was these kids clearly can get the words off the page. They're not spending that energy decoding. So now you've got to work on that vocabulary and that comprehension aspect of it. So really made some instructional decisions mid-year based on what our data was showing us. And that's the reason why we do these and have these data meetings, so that we can make instructional shifts. So this is our end of year data. So this is district-wide kindergarten. The first line, the top numbers, is where we were from, will this walk with me?
They just won't hear.
Who won't hear me? All right, so that one, this right here, is where we were at the beginning of the year, middle of the year. This is middle of the year, and that is end of the year. Okay, so that's kind of, this is district-wide, so that's what you're looking at. So I wanted you to see that. So
just if you walk away when it's screamed,
okay.
They can hear you.
Okay, all right. I don't think I'll leave it. Okay, thanks, Kristen. So that the bottom two numbers. The middle of the year, we had 73 kindergarten students who on their composite score, so that's again looking at all of those different skills, letter naming, fluency, phoneme, seg, all of those, 73 at the beginning of the year, or at the middle of the year, I'm sorry. Of those 73 kids, in June, 38 of them stayed within the red. They grew within the red, but they stayed within there. 6 of those kids moved out of the at-risk or the well below level range to the at-risk range. 26 of those kids moved to green, which is you're on level, and then 3 moved to above level. So, and then same thing with the yellow kids, the kids that were in that at-risk range. There were 34 mid-year. Of those 34, 3 kind of slid back a little bit, so it's going to be a matter of now finding who those, because we can click in the program that we use on who those 3 kids were to see kind of what it was where they broke down. Only 3 stayed yellow. Again, they grew within it because it's a range, but 21 of those kids moved to the on-level range and 7 to the above level. So that's how you read that chart, which is impressive. And then you break it down, and the areas that we really pay attention to, because that's what our Haggerty and our nonsense word fluency is really the main focuses of our curriculum. So this was mid-year results, and it was kind of like, a lot of red. But at our end of year. So you see that we had 12 students mid-year at AA Cole in kindergarten. Of those 12, half of them kind of stayed there, but the others moved. And then at Brewerton, 9 kids were yellow, 4 stayed there, but the others moved. So you can just see the shifts in colors, which is what you want to see. You don't want to see them staying. And this is looking at the same set of kids to see where they're moving. So Millard Hawk had 30 students that were red. Half of those kids stayed yellow for phoneme segmentation, and the rest of them moved. So half stayed and the other half shifted.
Erin?
Yeah.
Can you go back one slide for a second? One more. Those are all kindergarten, right?
This is all kindergarten.
So why in this chart does it not show any of those 64 going to red in the blue? But in the next charts, there's kids in the blue that start in the blue and they go to the red. Like if you go forward a slide or two now. Right now there's, so.
Because this is just looking at this one subtest. So composite-wise, when you take all of, so that's kind of what happens when, so the composite is the big picture, but we don't really, we look at that, but then we have to drill down to see, okay, where is it that these kids, because sometimes phoneme segmentation might be their strength, but then they get into, so I could give you the word fish, and you could say fish, those are the sounds that make up fish, but I give you the word fish, and you can't read it. So there's different skill sets. So of the composite, that is why, because this is drilling down.
Gotcha.
And then it's different because I was looking at the numbers. These are kids that have scores in both time frames. So the numbers, like if you go back to the mid-year at Cole, there's 10 students that were red here.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see how that's there? But then you go to this, which is the end of the year, and there's 12. It's because these are the kids that have scores mid-year and end of year. So if they were absent, and didn't test kind of thing. So it's a little bit different that way. But so this just drills down. So this is our very foundation skill right here. So I'd like to see more, blue and green, but we're getting there, right? I mean, when you've got half your kids.
So I really like the first two slides. This one made me a little bit concerned with all the blues going all different colors.
Yeah. And then the nonsense word fluency. So this is where they're given nonsense words and they have to look at them and give you the sounds and blend it together. Which this is more the actual reading aspect of it. So you want the kids to kind of maintain when they're blue, but the level of words increases at the end of the year because they're getting ready, for second grade. So sometimes certain sounds can trip them up, or if there were, if it was a digraph or something like that at the end and it tripped them up. So you just drill down and you see what their mistake was. And when they're a student who's in the blue or green, usually remediation is quick because there's usually nothing else getting in the way of it. But then the other stuff, we put more interventions in place. But for, Millard Hawk and A.A. Cole, or Hastings, I'm sorry, with the 7 and 6 students were yellow, and then, at Millard Hawk, they're all blue and green now. So that's the right way to move.
And I guess my only, I've had this concern, and it's just a global one. It's not anything specific with any kind of basis or facts that I am aware of. But in watching the data, I love the first two columns because those red and yellows are overwhelmingly going and progressing.
Yes.
But a concern is raised when there's greens and blues
Right,
turning to red. And so is too much attention being focused on the students that need remediation, and these students are kind of just being left in the wings.
Right, so that's the question that, and when you can drill down and I can click on that red and see who that student was, you see, you can get a better idea of, what it is that we need to address there. So then we move into, we did this one. So first grade, same thing. This is their end of year data, same exact chart, different numbers because they're different kids. And then we're going to look at the same two marks. So you can see that the first grade PSF is a little bit different in terms of the number of kids that were red or yellow. And this stems too from, these kids had a year of kindergarten under their belt already, even though it was that wonky hybrid virtual world that we were in. They still, even if the kids were remote, they still did their Haggerty every day. They still participated, and when they came into school, that's what we focused on. If they were hybrid, we focused on their ELA stuff. So I was pleased to see the growth that first grade made. We put some routines in place at Millard, Hawk, and Brewerton mid-year to help with that repetition of the skills, which I think added to that. And then here's their end of year data. So the same, same colors. You've got 21 kids at Millard Hawk who were red going the same way. The 2 students that were blue down there, they're green, so they didn't fall out of that on level range, but not too sure what happened there, so.
But I think the same thing, if you go back one, I think it was the same, yeah. There was 5 students at the bottom and they all became green.
Yeah. So, and sometimes, this is the PSF part, so sometimes when the kids have that, that's our Haggerty, that's our phonemic awareness. So when they have that, you kind of move on past it, so it doesn't become a focal point of your lesson, where the kids who continue to struggle still need that foundation. So figuring out, this was our first year with it, so we're gonna figure out what that was, because if that's the case and they stop doing Haggerty for this group of kids that were in the higher class, who probably shouldn't, maybe not spend as much time in it, but still keep up with those skills a little bit, so that's conversation. So this was mid-year, the same nonsense words, sounding things out. And then that's what it looks like at the end of the year. Yeah, much better. Much better. And then this is our 2nd through 3rd grade district-wide results. So you can see you've got composite 1, 2, and 3. That's again all of the subtests that take into account that composite score. And then it's broken down by the ORF scores, which is reading fluency, and then the maze part. The consultants and I had a lengthy conversation about the maze piece today, because when you look at many of the students' profiles, they made growth in ORF. They made above, well above growth, but in the maze, they didn't. So what the maze is, it's like a closed passage, so you have to be able to read it, and then there's a choice of which word fits into the blank that will make it make sense. So it's your vocabulary knowledge, your comprehension, and your ability to understand what you're reading when it all goes together. So there's a breakdown somewhere, and that's what the principals and the consultants and I are meeting Wednesday to try to figure out where that breakdown is happening. One of the consultants suggested, we can use that type of strategy with our content. You've got all these different vocabulary words, and some of it, what they noticed was grammar. So the, there, and there was a choice that some of the kids, they don't know the difference between those. And those are our language standards. So it's a matter of looking at what we're supposed to be teaching and where in the curriculum it falls, and making sure that that does get taught, so that the kids are understanding what they're reading. Because a student who can decode and their reading fluency is where it should be able to figure out what the words are. But if vocabulary is not being explicitly taught, that's going to be their barrier. So that's what we're trying to figure out right now. Because that starts in 2nd grade, the maze does. Our 4th grade is a bit of an anomaly. We're not too sure because the pattern is across the district. So it's not like you have one that really stood out as, wow, what are they doing? They all kind of went the wrong way. We're looking at the readability of the passage right now, but the consultants don't think it's that. We think that part of it is the maze that got in the way of some of that growth, but even their fluency didn't move where we wanted it to be. So in order for kids' fluency to increase and continue to move, they have to read. That's just a known fact. The more you read, the better you get, and your fluency increases. So in order for that to happen, the kids have to be reading the material, not necessarily just in small paragraphs or excerpts, but actual articles or stories and things like that, and reading more and more often in order to increase that fluency part. We don't want speed readers, but we need, in order for the kids to build up that stamina to get through, to read some of this, when I look at 5th grade going to 6th grade, their novels definitely change in length and content. So we need to continue to build that once the kids can really get those words off the page. So what we're going to pay attention to is these foundational skills. Are they transferring in to the 2nd grade and beyond for that oral reading fluency? Because that's one of the things that we've talked about is with our lesson plan template that we use for intervention, you have to have the kids read. You just have to have them read at the end, and you can't skip and spend too much time up here in the practice part and not apply it. Because if the kids aren't applying the skills they're being taught and practiced, they're not going to move as readers. You don't teach reading in isolation, you teach the skill, and then it has to be applied. So that's really what we've got to focus a little bit more on to make sure that these reading fluency results continue to move in the direction that we want them to go.
Just to clarify, in these charts, are the color codings the same as the color? So it's 1, 2, 3, 4. So red is 1.
This is just red, yellow, green. So the green is anybody that's above it.
So there's no blue.
There's no blue.
Okay, and then the numbers for each building under each column are the average for the entire grade level in that building?
Correct.
So
The across is the growth per building. The average is down at the bottom for the grade level, for composite 1, composite 2, composite 3.
the average over the course of the district.
Correct.
But each entry, like Brewerton, composite 2, 408, that is the average score for Brewerton?
Where are you looking, Kristen?
Brewerton, the 4th grade, Brewerton, go over to composite 2, 408.1.
Oh, yes.
That is the average score for
Yes.
4th grade students in Brewerton on that
Correct.
test.
Correct.
So anything, and what did you say the colors mean?
Green is at or above, red is kind of well below, and yellow is below.
At risk or
At
whatever?
risk, yep.
Okay. And so, on average, most of our students are either well below or at risk of being below?
Most of them.
Okay.
Yep. And that's what we're trying to figure out in 4th grade. Because it's never looked like that before.
Does it make a lot of sense?
No, so we don't know, we really don't know what happened there. So that's the conversation and what we're trying to figure out.
And then there's been, sporadic red, and it seems to be in the same row. And, I mean, what types of things are we doing to address
So
it?
that particular row had 2 sections this year.
For which class?
For the row with the red, for 4th grade, is that what you're looking at?
Yeah,
Yep.
Yep.
So there were 2 sections, and the class sizes were a little bit larger.
You're talking 4th or 5th?
4th.
Okay.
So classes were a little bit larger, so that is one of the classes that we, one of the grade levels that we increased. We added a section to kind of level them out so they aren't, 26 kids in a class, so that you can do a little bit smaller groups within the classroom. Don't really know, other than that. So I could sit and have a conversation, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's a lot of different things. Most of it comes down to the kids reading. The kids, what we have found, and not just at the elementary levels, but in some of the other grades too, we all want our kids to do well, and we all want our kids to perform and understand what we're doing. So sometimes instead of having them struggle, we do it for them. So what we saw towards the end of the year was a lot more reading to the kids of the material as opposed to the kids reading the material. So if the kids aren't reading it, they're not going to move and grow. So that's a mindset shift, that the productive struggle of trying to read these texts is what helps students get through and grow, not stay the same or go back. So we just need to get them reading more.
Right. And so I guess to put those 2 pictures together, and I know they're completely different grade levels, But my concern in the first set of the 4 colors with the blues and greens, all of a
The
sudden
primary
becoming
stuff?
yellows and reds, is there's been so much pressure put on these teachers to get these scores where they need to be. And my concern being that when the students have the scores they need to have, are they being, again, is this being left behind? So now, you know, they were pulling the average up, but by the end of the year, they're not pulling it up as high. And the ones maybe that were below the average, maybe a little bit higher, but now we've got a whole class of averages, and that shouldn't be the case.
Correct.
Because those aboves should have stayed and excelled above.
Correct.
So,
Yep, so that's what we're trying to, 4th grade is an anomaly, not, you know, like you even see down at 5th grade. They were yellow, dipped, but then they pulled it back up. So if they didn't dip in the mid-year point and they went up, right, they probably wouldn't be that yellow because they would have kept moving. So, so being able to maintain that trajectory of growth to get the kids where they need to be so that they remain green. You know, there's some, when you look at Cole's kindergarten, for example, they truly went from red to yellow to green throughout the year. So on some of their, you know, I'm only showing you 2 data points, but you saw what made up the composite. So when you put their stuff out, that is how you want to see it, right? Like those kindergarten kids came in, and this is where we got them from. But then they yellow at the mid-year and then green at the end of the year. So that's what you want to see happen, right?
well, like the AA Cole or 2 to 3. I mean,
Yeah.
that number could have gone up and it would have stayed red theoretically.
Right.
But it went down, like that's
Right.
particularly concerning.
Right. Yeah.
Erin, did I hear you say, does this include some hybrid learning as well?
So that was 2 years ago, was the hybrid
Okay, so
learning.
this data
So-
here is not any, that's
No,
all?
this is from this past school year.
Okay,
Yep,
so all in person,
all in person,
okay.
yep. But we're making up for
Yes,
some of that, so.
Well, not to mention
Absolutely, well, we're gonna be making up for that for.
for years, and
So-
not to mention the behavioral makeups
Correct.
that are happening, which
Yep.
I do have a feeling
Some of that.
impacted that
Yep.
because my daughter was in one of those
Yep.
sections.
Yep, and so the 3rd grade kids were the kids that when you go back, were in 1st grade March when we shut down. So that's where a ton of that, you know, usually it all kind of clicks in the spring for the 1st grade kids and you're taking all those foundational skills and they just go. They kind of shut down, this is the cohort that shut down and were, you know, out there and struggling, some of them. So then, you know, then you come back 4th grade, or 2nd grade, they were hybrid, and then this year was this year, right? So for that amount of growth, you know, for 3rd grade, it looks good. But then 4th grade, even with the state assessments that I know Tom's gonna talk about, the 3rd grade assessment is, you know, it's there. The 4th grade assessment shifts though in complexity and there is a shift. There's a shift from 2nd grade content to 3rd grade content, but then the state test stuff, there's a shift from 3rd to 4th. So we need to figure out this 4th grade so that this report doesn't look like this again this year. So that's why we've got that meeting set up where we can kind of look at all of our stuff, and we're gonna pay a little bit more attention to our benchmarks this year too, being that 2nd year back. The ELA benchmarks that we give 3 times a year in 3rd, 4th, and 5th, because this is one piece of it, right? Like if you can get the words off a page and you can do that, but the other piece is being able to read grade level or slightly above and be able to analyze it and work with it that way. So we're gonna pay a little bit more attention to that also this year and try to get some baseline from
Yeah, 'cause
there.
I mean, you touched on it, but to me, it's those 4th grade kids and let's go back 3 years,
Mhm.
right? Pre-COVID, COVID for 2 years, right? So this is the first year back. So this anomaly that you keep talking about might be the result of the
It could be.
2 and 3 year grades.
And the makeup of the kids could be.
Right, so I think that I don't know.
We've been talking about that as a county with the chiefs.
Yeah.
And across the board, we've seen in our whole county a decrease. So then I talked to my counterparts in Onondaga County, and a significant decrease as well during COVID.
Right.
And then we built on that, we investigated even further, and not only statewide, but nationally, and it's nothing that people didn't expect, but there were a lot less students reading at home. So the focus with parents during the pandemic was, you know, our social emotional, do our kids have what they need? There's been a massive disruption. Now there were obviously parents that still read with their kids and they still went over, you know, phonemic awareness and reading comprehension, but overall, I can speak for the state, there was a significant decrease in the focus of reading, and like Aaron said, if they're not regularly doing this, they're going to lose those skills.
Yeah, and I would say for every day, for the majority, and I'm not trying to throw AA Cole under the bus, but for if half their time was at home, right? If they were hybrid or if they weren't in it, or if you're taking hours away from instruction for a couple of years, to me, this is going to be I would say a leading contributor, especially if you're, you know, because you said it, you know, I don't know, right? We've never experienced that before, right? So to me, what would solidify these numbers is if other districts' 4th grade and 5th grade scores got kicked in the teeth like this.
Right.
Right? And where everybody else kind of progressed up through, and you could make up this, you know, your kindergartens, 1st and 2nd, you know, up to your 3rd grade, because those numbers are coming in well, and you can show the progress and those types of things where, you know, these poor kids didn't get it, you know, so it's gonna, you know, and then the big, you know, the big question is how do you make it up?
Right, and then that was my next question is, are we putting, you mentioned adding a 3rd section at Cole specifically, but I mean, are we putting are we hiring extra special ed teachers? Are we doing, what are we doing to address?
No, so we have a rewards program, which is one of the things we did this year. And what we, you know, and the principals reflecting on it, the beginning of it's a 25 lesson, it's a program, 25 lessons that works on the sounds and mainly a lot of vocabulary building. So root words, prefixes, suffixes, that kind of multisyllabic word reading, which is what 4th grade is. I mean, 4th grade is a lot of multisyllabic words. So if you're struggling just in your basic phonics skills, it's gonna be difficult for you. So this was our first year with it, and the first 15 lessons are review of the code, review of, you know, the structure, but then once it hits lesson 16 to 25, the lessons go from a 45 minute lesson to a 90-minute lesson. We have in our schedule 40 minutes for this block of time. So one lesson is going to take 2.5 lessons, which is fine because we have the whole school year. There's no rush to it. But it didn't necessarily get done like that. So they did lesson maybe 16 to today, and then tomorrow they're doing lesson 17, and then lesson 18. So they didn't take necessarily the full 90 minutes because the end of that lesson is a lot of reading, content-based reading with a lot of multisyllabic words using all the rules that they've been taught. So this coming school year, it is not a race to see the finish line of who finishes this program first. It is, we're gonna go through this program and we're gonna go through it with fidelity and the way it was intended to be done and get that reading in there. Utilizing our in-class intervention time that they have to work with small groups of kids and give them what they need. If they need extra support from an AIS teacher during that time, because there's AIS on the outside, so students who get resource based on their IEP are able to get resource as well as AIS, so they can get kind of double dipped. So we've got that in the schedule, so making sure that the schedule is done the right way to make sure that they can get both their services, and making sure that those instructional blocks are used to help the students in what they're struggling with, as opposed to maybe a study hall or a catch-up. So we have to look at that first, that resource of time, to make sure that the time is being used as it's intended to be used, as well as the program that we have, and making sure that the kids are doing the reading. You know, there should be a small population in each building that need support with the reading, but the majority of the kids should be able to read it. I don't
Right,
know.
and I guess that's my concern, because it seems that most of them are not going to be able to.
Right.
And so then what are the teachers getting in terms of supporting them so that they can, you know, teach the students who can read it, but also teach the more than half of them who can't?
Right. Well, that would be, you know, the AIS piece is a part to bridge that gap, and the in-class intervention. So kids, they might not be in the group for AIS, but they could be with their teacher getting the same lesson plan structure, just not at the very low level, at the, you know, next level up. And how can you build, you know, there's lots of ways to build fluency throughout the year. You don't have to do necessarily a full passage. You could do sentences. You could start with phrases and build up for those kids. So this is how many words they can read a minute, right? So the kids can get the words off the page, they're just slow with it. So that continuous repetition and that continuous practice, if they get that every day, multiple times a day, because it's really only, you know, you can only practice for so many, you know, like a lot of it's just quick. If that's done, we should see this cohort of 4th grade kids, I'm hoping the profile looks different this year, or for, you know, for the 5th grade. And it's a matter of putting your resources where they need to be. So if it needs to be an extra person is, you know, involved in 5th grade for AIS, then we have that extra person there.
And Tom, I mean, I know that we've been in touch with the teachers, you've talked about that, but the way that we've been kind of just putting out fires throughout all of COVID, have we talked about or talked to or sought the opinion of the people, our front ground, our front line in terms of the teachers as to what supports they need, as opposed to just providing them the ones that we think are best?
We have. We've had lots of conversations with teachers, but a big part of it is the, you know, support at home. Are they doing the things outside of school that they need to be doing? Are they reading at home like they were before? In a lot of cases, they weren't.
Right.
Are they taking a state assessment test, or are parents seeing their kids as so fragile that they can't take a state assessment and they opt their kids out? As we are, unfortunately, the opt-out district, which drives me crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to say that, and when it's my turn to talk. But those are things that teachers are frustrated with, is there's so many things put on teachers, and what are the parents also doing at home? Now we get it. During COVID, a lot of parents were in very difficult situations. I'm not downplaying that. But that's the frustration that some of the teachers have. They have skills that are supposed to be worked on at home and they're not. They're clearly not. And then kids were coming in and there were behavioral issues that we didn't see before. And some can clearly say, well, you know what? That's been across the board with COVID. Kids who are coming in that didn't show behavioral problems, now all of a sudden those things were starting to manifest itself. But there are other things too. When I used to oversee the elementary, there were some teachers that did a great job. That they would do something before a formative assessment, they would see some of the kids were struggling, they would come over, and while they were doing that, they would challenge the kids that already got it, right? But then there were other teachers that said, okay, you got this, you can work on your math now. And that drove me crazy because we're supposed to be challenging. That's why a couple screens back, when I saw, that's the first thing that I thought of. Because I think that some of the teachers look at it and go, okay, we're putting all our emphasis to differentiate, and that's just for the struggling kids. The differentiation is the top kids too.
Everybody.
How are we further pushing them? And I've seen Aaron do a great job coming in, leading professional development. We're going to be having principals in more classrooms, to be more than ever. 5 times a day, principals are going to be in different rooms, each of them a day. And that's going to allow them, A, to be a little bit more proactive because some of the disciplines that are having kids forgot how to be students, but also to be able to see what the teachers need. And like Aaron said, if we need more academic supports and the gap has widened so far that we're able to do that. We have the money to be able to go and to invest to do that. So when I looked at this, and Aaron and I spent hours pulling back the layers on, well, why? We would say, well, why? We didn't see this before, but then let's put this away and let's look at pre-COVID. Where were we leading to? And then clearly there was a disconnect during COVID. So to answer your question, yes, we have had the conversations with teachers. A big part of it is the frustration that they're not getting back the same level of support, but they understand in some situations why it was so hard during COVID.
And Christy, I had each elementary building kind of do we call them glows and grows for feedback, right? And I said, try to widen your lens and don't think just your building, but we're coming off of 2 crazy years. Lots of things, right? There have been lots of things. Many of them out of our control that we just had to, put out those fires, like you say. So what is it that, what are some things that we did well as a district or your building, kind of, for feedback, and then what are some things that we need to look at? And a lot of it was time. They wanted in-person faculty meetings and data meetings, right? So I think some of this too is in the spring, we heard it, we talked about it, that people were kind of done, right? Like it was a hard year. Yeah, they got paid for lunch. Yeah, they got paid for their planning, but they didn't have that time. They didn't have time to decompress, to walk out if they wanted to take a walk around the building, just to take a break. They were with kids all day. And the middle school and their SUP stuff, that came through with the student surveys. And I think that had something to do with this as well. When you're in a classroom and there's a lot, and it's full, and there's a lot of behaviors, you kind of get this, right, sense of kind of tapping out, right? As much as we don't want that to happen, that's reality, and we have to face that reality. So, this summer, the weather's been beautiful. I hope people really did enjoy and went and celebrated and took a break and are rejuvenated when they come back. We're not putting changes in place. We're gonna stay with what we're doing. Our goals are staying so that it's not another thing. But the teachers will get that time back this year. They will not be having breakfast in their classrooms. The kids will be in the cafeteria. They will not have to eat lunch with their kids, as long as, right, COVID stays and we don't have any craziness. So when we say normal, I think that there's gonna, the kids will have their carpets back. They'll be able to sit on the floor. So some of that elementary feel-good stuff that we have to have will come back. And I think that we will start to see some of this shift, is what I'm really hopeful for. So we did take that feedback and we've tried to implement some of that. Because if you don't know what the people who are with the kids every day are feeling and what they think is working and not, you have to get that feedback. Because if not, we're just gonna stagnate. And that's the only way to move forward, is to get that feedback. So we did it. We put it out there, and you have to make yourself vulnerable to do that. But we listened, and there are some things that we have answers for, and there's other things that, okay, we can maybe shift this or change that.
Teaching oral reading fluency with a mask on and having
It's hard. No, there's no doubt. There's no dispute. I think everyone here, including the entire community, knows that this was all, we all predicted that this was going to be craziness. And I guess my bigger concern is just, okay, that was yesterday.
Right.
So what are we doing tomorrow? And
Right.
so for this chart, yes, 4th grade, it's crazy, and the coal line is concerning. So I guess that's kind of where if there's a particular area that's very obviously standing out as concerning, what are we doing in terms of, so that becomes 5th grade. So the 5th grade teachers at Cole obviously are aware that they have, some struggling kids coming in. They are not, at least I would think, not going to approach the school year in exactly the same way as the Brewerton 5th grade teachers who, are having students come in a different situation. And I guess that's kind of where my question is directed, is are we doing anything? Have we talked to them? Are they
resources so the way that the schedule was done last year didn't allow for all of the AIS teachers to be in certain grade levels. So this year that's different, right? They've got 3 classrooms to spread this population out, so you can take a smaller group during that in-class intervention time. So instead of having maybe 10 kids around you, you've got 5. So those little things, you make a schedule so that you maximize your resources. That makes a difference. When you have this population, you only have 1.5 or 2 people helping, it's not enough. So.
And the counseling and social workers, and just talking with them, and just talking anecdotally with teachers, they've never seen so many students exhibit, whether they were tics or other nervous things that they would come in. They'd never seen anything like that before, and so it's a good thing that we now have a counselor and social worker in every building, because their dockets are full.
Yep, absolutely, and I think, you know, all of the effort and emphasis we put on getting the kids back into the school buildings and all of the after-school programs and all the stuff that we've been talking about spending the COVID money, as it's called, on. But, you know, this is obviously something that we should also be spending COVID money on, because this is, as we all believe, a direct result of COVID and you know, the things that came from that.
Yep.
And let's get over it. COVID's here to stay. Let's move on. And, you know, seriously, like, it's here, it's here. It's like the flu. Let's move on. Get kids in the building, in front of teachers, and you got plenty of data here. I trust you using it. It's a lot of data, so
Yeah.
I trust you. Your team is using it.
Yep.
None of it's a surprise to me.
Right.
When you lose a year and a half of kids' education in person, it's just not good.
Yeah.
And I'm super proud of them, you know, I mean, they've got, even the kids within the red group. So nobody, you know, did a couple kids fall back? Yeah, but they didn't fall back significantly where they can't be remediated and caught up. But the teachers, for everything, they worked their tails off and they got results. And not every district did. And I can say that ours did. And they would give anything, you know, for our kids. So that I'm super proud of with them.
Well, Erin, I can't thank you enough for what you do, and I believe that your leadership is going to get us through this. I'm very, very confident in that. I'm glad that you're in the position that you are, and I'm excited. Tom, I think you know that the board would support you in getting whatever we got to do, right? I think that's been pretty clear throughout this, but I can't thank you enough, and we kind of all, like we talked about, kind of predicted it, but now we're here, so let's. And I think you got, you know, you're the right person for the job. I'm excited to have you fix it.
Thank you.
Nice job.
Thanks.
Thank you, Aaron. At this time, we'll move on to item B. I need a motion to accept personnel.
Motion.
Second.
And Christie. All in favor? Item F, we're going to take it as in its entirety. Can I have a motion to accept item F, which is the consent agenda? That's Lori.
Second.
And Kristen. All in favor? At this time, we'll go on to reports. Any board members have anything to report to the board before I turn it over to Mr. Calaboo? It's been a good summer, nice hot one so far. Mr. Calabufo, with you and your picture, it's all yours.
Yeah, again, I'm not going to spend a lot of time, but there will be a meeting that I will break down, you know, state assessments. Really, what our focus is moving now and moving forward is having as much data sets that we can have, that we can have multiple indicators. So unfortunately, when you look at things like the state assessment, the 3 through 8 testing originally had a bad stigma to it, and rightfully so, because it was a teacher, it was a testing conglomerate, it was a company that profited off making all of these tests. The tests were 3 days long, numerous questions, they weren't made by New York State teachers, all of those changes have been made. The frustrating part is we have in place at the elementary a plethora of benchmark assessments, common assessments, district-wide, so we can look at the 3 grade levels, let's say, in Brewerton. We can compare them to the 2 or 3 grade levels in Cole. We can look at this. Aaron does a wonderful job. The teachers during staff development, they're able to get together. They are able to look at who's struggling and whatnot. They see the data. They have a chance to talk to the teachers where they're obviously doing things different in their classrooms and it's working and whatnot. But that's huge. The disconnect, though, is when we get to the middle school, where it's at embarrassingly low levels now compared to the rest of the county, to Onondaga County, and to the state. Before the pandemic hit, 2018-19, 6th grade, 7th grade, and 6th grade for ELA was a 72% participation rate. Not bad. 271 6th graders, 195 kids took the test. That's a 72%. Those overall proficiency is a 3 or a 4, and we had 39%. We had 77 students get that. In 7th grade, we had a total of 307 students in 7th grade. 168 students took the state assessment test for ELA in 7th grade. That's 55%. We had an overall 30%. They got 3 or 4. 8th grade, 278 students. We only had 138 students, that's 50%. Math, it was even worse. So out of 271 6th graders, we had 187 take it, that's a 69% participation. 7th grade, we had 307 students, we had 164 take it, that's a 53%, with only 33% getting 3 and 4. And then 8th grade, it was kind of shocking, 278 students, only 88 students took it, and that was 32%. Now, part of that is if they have a Regents exam, some of those students, about 15, 16 of them, would take the Regents exam instead. But I think it's coming off the old time where people were rightfully frustrated with the state assessments. Since then, and I presented on this before COVID, we went from 3 days to 2 days. All New York State teachers they actually create every single one of those questions. A lot of the things have changed. And so the reason why I say this is it's super important because parents call me and they say, Tom, I opted my kid out. We even have teachers in this district that opt their kids out because they don't want to fight with their kid. Like, it's a lot, it's enough, we don't want to do it. The problem is, without that one data set, now that they fixed that exam, we don't have that data set. And then all of a sudden parents are like, oh my God, my kid struggled taking their first Regents exam. Well, we have the data on that. I presented that 3 years ago. It was 79.8% was the average for kids coming in taking their first ELA Regents that took a state assessment test when they were coming up 3 through 8. And then it was 62% was the average for the kids that hadn't taken a state assessment test. They weren't used to the rigor of it. They weren't used to that type of test, the way the questions are asked. And so this year, what we're going to say to parents is basically across the board, if the elementary, I want to put it right on our website, all the data you just saw, I want everyone to be able to see. I want to be as transparent as possible. I want the parents to be able to say, okay, my kid's in the middle school, how do we know that the students are learning? It's not just the teacher gives them a grade, right? So something it's a little bit more objective than that. So what are those common assessments that our students are taking that we could then look at that? And then, like Christy said, do we need more so students aren't falling through the cracks? It would be terrible and an injustice if we just looked at state assessments. I don't ever want to do that. Nobody wants to. But if we're only looking at one indicator and we're not looking at multiple indicators, so I'm very happy. I'm talking to Kristen Enright, things that they're already starting at the middle school. They're doing their math audit. They're building in common assessments. They're doing this for ELA. So it's more of a proactive than a reactive, and you find out, oh my goodness, now they're coming into 9th grade and they don't have the reading skills that they need to be successful. So our goal is to make sure that we have multiple indicators, assessments that are out there that we can look at, but that we're also not spending numerous amount of days just testing kids. Nobody wants that. No one wants that. But it's so important that we have indicators. Somebody goes to the doctor, they don't just give you a pill based on your age. They say, okay, we're going to take your cholesterol, we're going to take this, we're going to take that. Based on 8 points, this is what you need to do. That's what we really need to get back to. I'm very happy, like Christy said, we have a number of opportunities for teachers to tutor after school to make extra money with the COVID money. We have clubs, we have activities, we have all of these things fully functioning like we were before COVID. It's just we need to make sure that we're providing students with, we're providing their parents and the students and the teachers with the data to say, okay, these students right here are struggling with specifically this is how we're going to help them, instead of they fly under the radar. So I wanted to talk about that. I gave the board a lot of other data results. We don't have to go in right now, but if you ever have any questions, I'm very pleased with students in the high school and in the middle school that were failing 2 or more, that number drastically reduced. I can tell you we hired more special ed teachers in the middle school and reading teachers that we had before to be able to target this gap that is happening in our middle school. So we are focused. If you ever around and you want to see one of Aaron's data meetings with the teachers, it's extremely impressive because the teachers, they want to be able to do better as well. And we'll give them the resources, whatever they need to do that. It's just identifying those gaps with specific students and how to get there. So I'm thrilled. This summer has been way better than last summer because we haven't talked about COVID and plans and 6 feet or 3 feet. Do we gonna have a barrier? Do we not need a barrier? We've actually been talking about instruction. And I'm so excited to pop down. I don't want to call her on the spot, but Dr. Sweeney over there and the things that she brings to the table with her experience as an educator, we're really excited to be in the spot we're in. We've hired some awesome new teachers that we just can't wait. They're super excited. They keep coming in when they don't even have to because they just talk to Aaron, personnel, and whatnot. So I can go on and on, but I'll stop. I'm very excited, and Steve, you're gonna love this, that you're gonna get a lot more data. It's not just gonna be 2 or 3 times throughout the year, it's gonna just be a rolling account of the progress that our students are making, as it should be.
Tom, I just have a question on one of the things that you gave us.
Yeah.
I also noticed the 3rd and 4th grade numbers were phenomenal, 92%, 91% participation rate. Is that normal? Do the participation rates normally drop down, or is this maybe a sign that the people that have students that are newly taking state tests, that this is their first experience and they get the information with respect to now, whereas an 8th grade parent that opted
Yes. 18, 19?
An 8th grade parent that opted them out in 3rd grade and then has just agreed to opt them out every year since and never really got the information about the changes and everything else. Do you think that because those percentages, I mean, it's stark difference, 92% for 3rd grade. 4th grade, this was their first year too, right?
It's the exact same conversation that I had with Aaron, exactly what you're saying.
But they didn't have it last year, right, the 4th graders?
Correct.
Right, so none of
When
those
you say
parents.
last year, do you mean?
I mean, last year,
Yes.
COVID year.
Correct.
So none of those parents had ever had experience with state testing. And so they're coming in fresh and getting the information that it's all New York State teachers making the tests, that teachers are not getting paid or bonuses or anything tied to the scores, all of that.
Yes.
And then the numbers with 8th grade being so low, I mean, is that divot kind of just transferring as those students move
Part of
through?
it,
Okay.
but I asked probably about 75 parents because I was curious, and they said, elementary, I could tell my kid why. By the time they get to the middle school, they're like, Tom, you'll see when your kids are in the middle school, it's hard, you're fighting those battles. But what I'm going to explain this year is really over-communicating the reason why it is so important that we do have them take this for numerous reasons. But I think part of it, Christy, when I would call them, anecdotally, they would tell me that it was just that struggle, that they just didn't want to, come home from work, and Johnny's friend isn't taking it, so he's not going to take it. So it has to get back to the fact that, yes, it's hard to say to your kids, but we are going to have you take it. And then for the ones that take the first day, and then they realize, and the parents are like, oh my God, I didn't realize I don't want, now it's a 0. So some of this, you can't opt out once you took the first day. So we're going to do a really good job this year leading up to it, letting the parents know why it's so important. And again, all of those changes that I sent out before, I want to do that again. And all the bulleted items that change and why now. It's a good thing. It's a good indicator. Because before, parents would say to me, oh, I really like this teacher and I don't want that to be negative against me. It doesn't have any impact on them at all of their evaluations.
Right, and I'm wondering how many of those 8th grade parents that opt out know that.
True.
Because they probably didn't read that letter.
Sure.
Because as soon as they saw state testing, they were like, oh, no, we're opting out, we don't need to read that.
Yep. So I'm going to do it again. I'm going to do it with the video, brief, standard 3 minutes. And then I'm going to do the bulleted.
You're going to go to their house and see.
I can pretty much, the next is go to their house. But
that
just
was my question is, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, before any of this happened, did any of these changes, did we see a drop over the course of 3rd to 8th grade this drastic?
No, it was just horrible. It was horrible across the board. It's like we came out of the gate before I got here as the opt-out district, and our numbers were so much lower than the rest of the county. But it's good to see that it's starting to come back, and people are like, no. But it's literally, you got to literally hit the pavement early to say to parents. They're like, oh my God, I didn't realize all of those changes. Yeah, I do want my kid to take it. It's getting that more and more and more early to let them know we need multiple indicators.
People trust you, Tom, so the more you can communicate that, the better off we'll all be, for sure. Generally speaking. Not everybody, but generally speaking.
months.
We had a teacher in middle school that was holding, asked to have time at a board meeting, and was allowed to have this time to talk about opting out and getting all these parents saying, don't let your kid take this test, opt them out, and all this, so we don't have.
Remember, Lori, though, I want to be very clear, that was a different test 6 years ago.
Yes, I know.
It was made by
I
a
know.
company that was
I know.
profiting, so
Yeah.
I just want people
But
to know.
people don't know that that's changed.
And that's why it's on me to make sure that I let all the principals
Right.
know when you're having conversations during parent conferences,
Yes.
give them the sheet. And that's what I said to them before. We were on the roll to do all of this and then COVID hit. But I said to them, when you're having parent conferences, no better opportunity. You're face to face with parents and say, I just want you to know, when this comes up, we've made the changes. It is so important
Yeah.
because it's 2 days and it's not 3. It's half days, it's not 3/4 of a day. And it'll let us know what your kid needs to be successful.
Okay, we'll move on to item H. Do this in its entirety, H1 and H2, which is the approval of the second reading of the district policies and the approval of the 22-23 district-wide school safety plan. Can I have a motion to accept? Mr. Murphy. And a second?
I'll second.
That's Steve. And any discussion on any of that? All in favor? Okay. And we have a proposed executive session. They have a motion to go into executive session to discuss matters leading to the tenure of 2 particular people with no action to follow. We'll also adjourn from there. They have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Steve. And a second? Chance? Okay, all in favor? Okay, executive session at 8:01.